You're listening to Paul Anderson. This is the Sideshow Podcast.
Hey everybody, how's it going? This is your host Paul Anderson and welcome to the Sideshow. This is an exciting show for me because I finally get to actually discuss a little bit about the upcoming rumored fight, Conor Mcgregor versus Floyd Money Mayweather. So this is a very exciting show. I have some opinions. There's always a lot of news floating around. I actually want to start off with some of the sponsors. The sponsors this week are Lyft. If you are interested in becoming a Lyft driver, just enter the promo code SideshowPC over at Lyft.com. And the first-time drivers actually get a $500 first-time driver's bonus. So go check that out if you're interested. And other than that, that's what I got going on. You want to follow us over on social media? All right, follow us on social media. We have Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Everything's under Sideshow PC. And as well, if you want to shoot me a email, my email is sideshow508@gmail.com. Definitely shoot me a message over there. Any ideas for the future shows? Any guests that you may have in mind? I mean, I'm always open to doing interviews and stuff too, as you can see in some of my past podcast episodes. So definitely check it out. And my website actually, which is live, if you want to listen to these shows rather than through iTunes, you can actually go to sideshowpod.com. So that is something that is a little bit new and definitely worth checking out. Save it every week. Follow us on the social media, and you'll definitely you won't be disappointed. So let's get right into it. I have been a huge combat sports fan. I liked boxing growing up. I mean, everybody enjoyed watching the Tyson fights, the Holyfields, and then eventually, I remember my first MMA pay-per-view. I'm not going to say I was one of the originals watching the VHS tapes that you would find at like a Blockbuster of the UFC, like UFC 1 and 2. I did see those. By any chance, I did actually get to see those growing up. But I wasn't a true fan up until my first pay-per-view I got to watch with one of my best friends. He invited me over, told me all about the sport. I was kind of hesitant at first, but then I watched the first one, and it was amazing. My first UFC event watching on pay-per-view was Anderson Silva versus Dan Henderson. And that was probably one of my favorite fights to watch, and I'd never seen such a badass fighter for the first time. So it was a great introduction. So definitely, I mean, I've been into combat sports. MMA has definitely been something I've never gotten to train it, but at the same time, though, I love watching it, and I love how the UFC has definitely come about in the last, I want to say, I don't know, last 5 years they've really come around. I mean, I have some opinions on some other stuff that I'll probably touch upon a little later on, but I want to really get into the rumored fight between Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather. I am a huge Conor McGregor fan. I support the guy. I love his mindset. I mean, a lot of people complain about his ego and all this other shit, but honestly, in my opinion, I think he's a great fighter. I think he is a very, very dominant fighter. I mean, he definitely got a little bit exposed during the Nate Diaz fight, and hey, fuck it. I mean, he didn't make excuses, so neither will I. But he did redeem that loss, even though it was a close fight. It was very entertaining. I loved watching that fight, and I've rewatched it before, and it's fantastic. But I think in one way, if you really think about it, Conor is a very dominant MMA fighter in the UFC. He's the current lightweight champion, and he actually, they're saying he vacated, stripped, whatever the hell you want to say, his featherweight title that he beat Jose Aldo in last year. So you got to really think about that. this guy has been on a friggin' tear where, he's not just like, he's beating a lot of his main opponents. I mean, you got to think about everything that led up to UFC 205, where him and Eddie Alvarez, they really did a lot of shit talking back and forth. And I mean, that was a fight that I had a feeling was going to go in Conor's direction. But I mean, I think that would have been a great opportunity for Eddie Alvarez to prove that he was a dominant lightweight fighter. I do really like Eddie Alvarez. I think he's a great fighter as well. I have a lot of respect for all these guys that actually step in the cage and actually fight and compete in this sport. It's not an easy sport, and you can see that. I mean, you got to look at look at all the turn of events. I mean, look at the and a lot of people are going to say this is a stupid comment, but look at somebody like a CM Punk. He came from the WWE. He steps in, fights Mickey Gall, and he got his ass kicked. I mean, that's just the fact. I think he's a fantastic fighter. Up and coming. I mean, he needs to learn. I mean, it's not something. A lot of these guys were bred to fight. I mean, you don't just say this is my next career move and just go for it after a year. I mean, some of these guys have been training pretty much since they've been able to walk. And that's kind of like, that's where I think the sport's heading nowadays, where, they have all of these younger jiu-jitsu classes for children and all this stuff. So I think that's it's a fantastic way to look at the sport is growing. People are not just sticking to karate anymore in like Kempo, excuse me. A lot of people, Kempo is great, but they're really trying to expand. I mean, between all of the other options that you have out there, you have Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you have kickboxing, you have wrestling, you have Muay Thai. You have boxing too. So I think. And that's the thing that I think works out in Conor's favor is that, he's been training for a long time. And, I guarantee you the first thing a lot of fighters want to do is figure out either one or two things. It's going to be ground game or stand-up game. So at the age of 27 or 28 now, you got to look at Conor and really wonder that, this guy's been training pretty much probably since he was younger. And like I said, he's a fantastic fighter. And in a recent interview, Dana White even said that on the Conan O'Brien show, this was the other night, that Floyd Mayweather has trouble with southpaws, which is a left-handed fighter for those who are listening and don't know that. And I really think that Conor's accuracy can be a big problem. I mean, he's taking kicks from people, he's taking beatings from other fighters, and you got to think like he has the durability. I mean, the durability to go all 12 rounds of a boxing fight is now going to be one of those interesting turn of events. So, excuse me on that. But yeah, I mean, I really do think Conor has a really good chance against Floyd. I don't want to rule Floyd out. I mean, Floyd is a fantastic fighter. I mean, his record speaks for itself. 49-0. I mean, his last 3 fights have come through unanimous decision. And then, one of those wins as well was against Manny Pacquiao, who was which that fight, in my opinion, took literally forever to put together. And I feel like, yeah, it sold great pay-per-views and everything like that, but you got to think, like, when these two were in their prime, I mean, I think that fight should never honestly happened. In all honesty, I think that fight should have never happened. It was really 5 years too late, and that's just my opinion on that because, these guys are now, they're older. I mean, that fight did take place in 2015, and, Manny was also coming, I'm pretty sure he's actually working off of 2 back-to-back losses as of right now. And that's no jab at him. I mean, Manny is a fantastic fighter too, and he has an upcoming fight, I'm pretty sure, really soon. They did announce that. I'm actually going to cross-reference what I just said, just to be sure. But, Manny is an interesting fighter as well, but I'm going to actually stick to Floyd and Conor because that's the fight that's rumored. That's the fight that people are feeling very positive about. There's going to be a lot of money put out there. There's rumored to be they want $100 million on each side, and it's a lot of money. And the fact about it is that Floyd does talk a lot of game, saying that at the end of the day, I have my side. I'm the A side, and Conor, you're the B side. But it doesn't come. It shouldn't come down to that, because if right now, another thing that a lot of people fail to realize is that I'm pretty sure that Floyd is actually coming up to Rocky. I'm drawing a little bit of a blank. I don't have the note on me, but he is about to break a record for boxing. So it's Rocky Martino. I'm pretty sure that's who it is. And that's, I do like both of these guys in a fight. What really kind of annoys me is when they keep saying, they do reiterate a boxing fight and all this. Well, no shit. I mean, you got to look at it as Floyd's not an MMA fighter. MMA fighters are built completely different than compared to a boxer. And that's just common sense. I mean, anybody who's listening to this is agreeing on that one, is like, no shit. But the thing about it is like Conor had to actually go back out after the Diaz loss and go and adjust. And he has stated that, when he is in a full fight camp, and he's spending good money on his camps as well. And he has a great supporting cast in his training camps. And I mean, John Kavanaugh, it shows, honestly. The guy he's a fantastic coach. I mean, look at Artem Lembov. I mean, he's up and coming. He is going to be something special in the division that he's fighting in. I mean, so I do think if I had to take a winner right now, I'm biased out right now. If I had to say right off the top without really analyzing, I would say Conor. I mean, Conor definitely can. He can definitely push the pace, and he might actually give Floyd a lot of trouble. I mean, and is he hesitant? I don't know. I mean, look how long Floyd took to fucking sign the Manny Pacquiao deal, and then that even turned into ridiculousness. I mean, come on, they took over. Like I said, I don't even know exactly when the rumoring of that fight started, but by the time they actually signed that fight, like I said, they were 5 years too late. You're looking at two older gentlemen, and it was ridiculous. It was just ridiculous how long that fight took. And, it was unfortunate. I wish that fight would have taken a lot sooner than taking a step back. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more. I'm going to actually zoom a little bit more into Conor McGregor, for those who don't know who he is. I mean, Conor is an interesting fighter. I could say he hasn't really been in the UFC all that long, but he has a very outstanding record. It shows. 13 seconds to knock out Jose Aldo. Jose was 10 years undefeated. His last loss did come to Nate Diaz. I'm going to name off a couple of these people. They're not pushovers. I mean, straight up, they're not freaking pushovers. I mean, in this division, right now, if we were to go back to 2013, he started in the UFC in 2013 as well. His second fight was actually against the current interim featherweight champion, Max Holloway. And that was actually his only other... And the only other... that was a decision. It was a unanimous decision. And... the only other decision he had was the second Diaz fight. So now, I'm just gonna list off a couple names, and they're not too there are a lot of bigger names in there. You got Max Holloway, you have Dustin Poirier, Dennis Sever, Chad Mendez, and Jose Aldo, and then Nate Diaz. And then he also, like I said earlier on, he beat lightweight champion Eddie Alvarez. So that fight to me is a fantastic fight to watch. If they do get the deal done, who knows how long this will take. Conor's right now, like I said, in the prime of his career, and you have Floyd, who is now in his 40s. So it's definitely a great fight if they do put it together. If they don't, then it's really unfortunate. But I have a feeling this is going to happen, and I think we're going to do we'll definitely bring in a couple people and talk about this when we get a little closer to the fight. But yeah, that's my take on the Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather fight. That's on this first half of the podcast. We're doing a two-parter this week, so So we'll be right back after the brief message from our sponsors. Sideshow PC is brought to you in part by Lyft. Make up to $35 an hour driving your car. Sign up to be a Lyft driver today. Enter the promo code SideshowPC to earn a $500 first-time driver's bonus. It'll let you pick your own hours and be your own boss. And welcome back. And this is the part 2 side of the podcast. This podcast is, like I said, something that I'm going to try to do 2-parters, try to change it up a little bit. That first half was about the upcoming fight, once it is signed, of Conor McGregor and Floyd Money Mayweather. So that's my take on that side of the coin. But this time I actually kind of scoping it out, seeing out on Facebook and all these different social medias. People were posting a lot of different... they were posting this list, and the list was pretty much the top 10 influential albums that influenced you like during your high school years. So I thought about this list. I was going to post it out there a long time ago, and I didn't do it just because, like, well, one, I didn't really think it was that important, and two, I just really couldn't really put all my thoughts together because there's so many good albums out in the music scene. And when I was in high school, it took a long time. I mean, I almost graduated 10 years ago. I graduated in 2007, and I was very much into music then as I am now. And I think there are so many good albums that have come out. Like, I can't really, like, put my finger on. I mean, there's probably way more than 10. But I put this list together, and I think each one, I mean, they're in no particular order of which one's better than the other. I think out of the 10, though, I think there were 2 that were the first ones that actually kind of came to mind, and I think those were probably my 2. I think these 2 albums were my most influential out of the 10, though. Probably from my actually middle school years to graduating high school. So I'm going to start from the bottom, and I'm going to kind of maybe bounce around my list, but I'm going to leave the last 2 most influential for the very end. Those 2 are actually probably going to be in order of one another, though. So coming in at number 10, Questions and Answers by the band The Sleeping. This album was very influential to me. I loved listening to this band. I actually discovered this band playing the game Guitar Hero 3, and I actually ended up seeing The Sleeping live for the first time in 2007 at the Middle East in Cambridge with Bayside, June, A Day to Remember, and it was Bayside, June, A Day to Remember. I can't remember if there was somebody else in between there, but if there was, whatever. But that was probably that was actually my very first show I ever got to go to. I had a car and everything like that. Me and a bunch of friends, we loaded up and we went and saw that concert over at the Middle East. That was probably that was one of my favorite sets I've ever seen from a band, and to this day, it's still definitely stuck out to me. And it was cool because, like, that album stuck out to me a lot. Don't Hold Back was probably one of my favorite songs they ever wrote. So that's definitely in my top 10 most influential albums. It was cool, though, because this past at the end of last year, 2016, they came back, I guess, and played a reunion show over at the Paramount in New York City, and that was kind of cool. So, I mean, I didn't get to go. I wish I did. That would have been a very good show to see for the most part. The next one that I have on my list is Biffy Clyro, Puzzle. The band is Biffy Clyro, and their album is called Puzzle. This was probably one of my favorite albums that came out around the time, or in general, because I thought they were doing something different, and I actually got to see them live, and I think their live performance definitely, they were just wild men on stage. I got to see them at the Worcester Palladium with Say Anything and Weatherbox, and I think there was one more. I think it was Manchester Orchestra, and that was a really fun show because like they were one of those bands that like. Not like they were playing and a lot of people had fun, but they weren't as big. Right now, like they're actually on a tear. They put out a new record that people should go check out, and they're definitely on a tear. So Puzzle to me though was one of my favorite albums of that time, and definitely deserves to be on this list. The next one I have on my list is Motion City soundtrack, Commit to Memory. I actually went back recently and I've been listening to a lot of this CD, and I think that's probably been one of my most. I think definitely for my senior year, Motion City soundtrack was probably one of my favorite bands, next to a couple of the other ones that I'm leading into, but Motion City would definitely. It sucks that they broke up, and but at least I'm listening to some other podcasts out there and hearing interviews from Justin Pierre. It's great to know that him and a lot of the members ended on great terms, and that that one day maybe you never know that they could get back together. I've gotten to see them. I got to see them twice. Once at Warped Tour, and another time actually at the Paradise with Bayside as well. I mean, you're gonna hear a lot of Bayside stories. They are one of my favorite bands, so I'll get into that in a couple minutes. But Motion City definitely, Commit to Memory was probably one of my favorite albums they ever put out, and I definitely needed to put them on this list. I mean, Commit to Memory, it was so good. It was a great sing-along CD. When you really look at it, I mean, some of the songs that are on there, Hold Me Down, Feels Like Rain, Everything Is All Right. I mean, Let's Get Fucked Up and Die. Those were some of the songs that you just turn on. They're just catchy tunes. And I think the order of how those songs were presented to an album listener definitely did the album justice. So definitely one of my that should be if I had to put an order, like I said in the beginning, is there's no real order for these other than the last two, but I would probably put that at number 3. That's just one of my favorite albums of all time. So the next album that I actually have in mind on my list is from a band I've never actually gotten to see live, and I'm truly disappointed in myself with this because they've been around for a long time. They put out numerous albums that are just fantastic, and a lot of people would call them I don't agree with this, but they call them a sellout band. I would say it's Rise Against, and the album is The Sufferer and the Witness. Now, I don't feel that they're a sellout band whatsoever. I think they definitely ring true with what they write for music, and The Sufferer and the Witness is definitely just that album. I remember I was at my house. This is actually one of the first times I ever actually got to listen to Rise Against, and it was on MTV2. They had an album of the week, and a couple times actually, this was around a time where a lot of bands were just starting to break through, and Rise Against happened to be one of them and I saw a commercial, and it was the Ready to Fall video. So I'm watching it, and I started looking into this band, and I fell in love with it after that, and I went back, listened to a lot of their other albums, and I've been a fan since. But The Sufferer and the Witness was always on heavy rotation in my senior year of high school, and then even beyond that. Unfortunately, I did not take advantage of the times that they were in the Massachusetts area to go see them live. Shame on me, and that's just one of those unfortunate circumstances. I just never ever got a chance to go see them, and that sucks to suck. That it sucks to be me for that matter. But if they, I know they put on a good show. I've watched a lot of YouTube videos and stuff where they've played live and whatnot, and they just sound fantastic. I think the one show I do regret not going to, and it actually will go into my next one. Is there was the next band that's on my list it was Rise Against and Alkaline Trio. Alkaline Trio is by far. I mean, I can break out songs and all that, and I love that band, man. Matt Skiba and those guys are just such a fantastic group, and I just cannot help but have Crimson on my list of favorite bands and most influential albums on my list from high school. I mean, Alkaline Trio was by far one of the most influential bands that I ever got to listen to, and I mean, I have to say that Alkaline Trio to this day will always be one of my favorite bands. I mean, they're tattooed on me. I listen to them at work when I'm on heavy rotation. They're in my playlists. I'm always still looking up, even though Matt's doing Blink-182 right now. I'm still interested to know when or if they'll ever make a comeback after he's done doing that or whatever. I mean, I don't know if that's a forever thing. I mean, personally, I'd love to see him come back and do take a little break from Blink-182 and do some Alkaline Trio again. That would be fantastic. I mean, that is his baby. He's been doing that for such a long time that it would be a shame to see it just kind of fade away because of some other project like Blink-182. But Crimson is definitely, I mean, it's such a classic album because it was around the time, like I said, I was in high school, and those guys just put out such a killer record. And I'm just going to list off a couple of songs that they actually had on that record for people. If you are a fan of it, I mean, Mercy Me, Sadie are hands down two of my favorite songs, and Time to Waste as well. Those are three of the songs I think that were always on a heavy rotation of my playlist, even today. So, the next one I actually have to say, and it's funny to say though, is a Blink-182 album. So that's the next one on my list. It's Emina of the State. I'm sorry. Definitely one of my favorite albums. It came out, I mean, well before my high school years. I was actually probably in middle school when that album came out, and I thought that album, for my age, at the time, was very, very risque. If that's even the right way to put it. I mean, they were talking about shit that I don't think my mom would have approved of at that age, and for me, it was just like, what's my age again? I mean, Dump Weed. I mean, that album to this day will always be a classic. And for people who aren't Blink-182 fans, I completely understand your take on why you wouldn't be a fan of them because of everything they've been going through for the past, I don't know, 5-6 years. And even further than that, I mean, this last album, California, is one of my favorite albums they've ever happened to put out. So, but the thing about Emina of the State is like Adam's song was a song that actually, like, a lot of punk kids would actually go back and listen to it, and it was like, it was I think that was a very emotional song for the band. It was definitely one of their biggest breakthrough albums. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that was one of my favorite albums. I mean, you had to get the unedited version at the time too, and that made it even better. I mean, nowadays it's that whole parental advisory shit isn't really a thing anymore. So, but when you're a kid and you get an album that's, with a blonde nurse with the tattoos and it says parental advisory, you knew you were in for a good album. And that album definitely didn't let me down. It definitely influenced me for all these years. Getting my first copy of it was definitely the best thing I've ever done. So, right now, I'm just kind of going through this list. I have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4 CDs left. The next one on my list is going to be not even from it's actually from a festival, not so much a band. And the album is actually the Warped Tour compilation 2004. This album actually, to me, it turned me on to punk music, pop punk music, heavy music. They had bands on that compilation CD from that year. I didn't get to go to the Warped Tour. Actually, my first Warped Tour was in 2007. So I always listened to the compilation CDs to just get myself really into the music, and it sold me on so many of my favorite artists today. I mean, some of the artists that were on there: Bad Religion, The Descendants, Newfound Glory. I mean, that's just three of my. Thursday was on that album. I mean, so for me, I think that was definitely like my first step into actually enjoying punk music and pop punk music, and it really got me into it today. I mean, I am a huge Newfound Glory fan. Unfortunately, they are not on my list of favorite albums because I didn't actually discover Newfound Glory until my college years, which is very eerie, but that's just how it was. I wasn't into that music when I was a senior in high school and all that. So, I mean, I did get into it probably last 6 months of my senior year. And then I definitely took off more in college. I got into it more and more in college. And then I started developing an opinion and listening to heavy music, such as like bands like Vanna or My Child, My Bride. That Atreyu. I mean, Atreyu was always another one of my favorite bands. I'd probably put them in an honorable mention. But Warped Tour 2004 compilation, like it was a huge. Like I said, it was a huge stepping stone for me because a lot of the bands I was listening to were a lot of radio bands, which is what a lot of people start on. Which is not, there's nothing wrong with that. When you're a kid and everything like that, you're really trying to develop your own taste in music. So when you're doing stuff like that, you're definitely being a little bit more picky. And I swear to God, the punk, like when I was learning about the band Anti-Flag for the first time from this album, it was just something else. Like you have to understand. Like I'm pulling up the list now, so you understand like some of the bands that are on this list and are on this compilation. So I am actually ending up with the wrong one. I have the 2005. 2005 was a good year, but I'm looking for the 2004. All right, here we go. So I'm just gonna list it off because it's a double disc. The first disc was probably my favorite over the second, but it's whatever. I'm just gonna list them off, and these are some of my favorite bands that were on this. So, I mean, right in order: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the album. Even number 7, the bouncing. Yeah. So the first one on the album is "Do Found Glory." The second artist on the second artist on this album is NoFX, and that was actually the first time I actually got to listen to NoFX, and I fell in love with them because like I started getting more and more involved with what they were putting out for music, and I enjoyed them. Flogging Molly was. I actually got to see them in 2007 for the first time, and that was the only time I actually got to see them. And it was one of the funnest sets I got to see, and I was actually into them during my high school years too. So, like I said, this album definitely influenced me to be deeper into the punk scene than anything else. Thursday was on it, and then The Descendants, Bouncing Souls, Yellow Card, Pennywise, Motion City Soundtrack, Atmosphere. You have Sugar Cult. I mean, these are some of the. This is just a small little taste of. It's like a sip of like what I got to enjoy. So if you ever actually wanted to get yourself into this type of music or whatever, totally pick up these albums. They still sell them at FYE. That's where I got my first copy. Actually, no, I'm sorry. I got mine actually at a company that doesn't even exist anymore called Strawberries. I picked that one up and Punkorama Volume 3 for the first time. So those were and that's what actually got me into punk music. So yeah, that's another one. I have a cat here, so she's saying hi to everybody. So the next album that influenced me in high school was from a band from Canada called Silverstein. Silverstein put out Discovering the Waterfront in 2007, and I actually ended up learning about. So the thing is, I learned about Silverstein kind of by default through Bayside. I didn't get to go see him. I was learning about Bayside around the same time as well. So what happened was, I was listening to Bayside, and I found out their label was Victory Records, and I was a huge Victory Records fan through and through, honestly. I mean, they had bands like Taking Back Sunday, they had bands like Atreyu, The Sleeping was signed to them. So one of those things about about Victory Records at the time was they had all these great bands on there. So what I would typically do is I'd go to the Victory Records website, and I'd pull up all these different artists, and I would literally download anything I could get or YouTube it and learn about them. And Silverstein was it was like a DVD that I had gotten from Victory. And I actually learned about them, and they had a music video for oh my god, what was the music video? I'm drawing a blank. I see the song title, I'm gonna be like, oh fuck, that was it. But anyways, they had a music video on there, and it was it's gonna bother me, so I'm just gonna. What was it? Oh my god, I can't believe I'm drawing a blank right now, and this is really sad for me. Um, oh, that's right. It was "Smile in Your Sleep." They had an album, or they had a video on on there. So I was learning about I was watching it and I learned about them and I love the song. So eventually I picked up the album. So and then another buddy of mine, actually, when I was in college, he actually handed me another DVD, and they were on there as well. And that's actually where I started picking up tips about or learning about like bands like Hawthorne Heights. Just definitely, but in my high school years, I mean, Silverstein was one of my favorite bands of all time. So I definitely can't help but keep them on this list. So one of the so I'm down to my last two, and with these last two, they were definitely like I said, the first ones that came to mind. I wrote them down, and it made sense. I'm gonna go. Like I said, this kind of goes in order, like from which one between these two are my most influential. The first one I have is gonna be by the band the Goo Goo Dolls, "Dizzy Up the Girl." "Dizzy Up the Girl" was definitely it was a 1999 hit album of theirs, and I loved it. I loved that album. Me and my neighbor used to actually listen to that record front to back every day during the summer, just blasted it, and it was such a fantastic album. I mean, the beginning, man, the best way I can probably put it is like there was at that time and for my age, I understood and really truly liked that album because you had songs like Iris on there. You had Slide, Broadway. Broadway was probably one of my favorite songs that they ever wrote. That album definitely just even today. I mean, I'm 27 years old. That album came out probably when I was about probably like 10 or 11 years old, and I ended up getting my first copy of it. I burnt it when burning CDs were a thing. I burnt that CD from my sister. She had it in her music collection, and I was like, I was really into it, so I got a copy of their CD, and I listened to it pretty much every day. Every single day. I mean, I would roll into my sixth grade, walk in, like on the bus or something like that, and I'd always listen to the Goo Goo Dolls CD while on the bus. And, just mind my own business. That was the album I listened to. I love that CD. To this day, I still listen to that CD. I'll put it on once in a while and just definitely reminisce just how great that album has influenced me today. So my number one overall album, which actually just turned 10 years old, is from the band, and you're probably guessing it now, is from the band Bayside. It is The Walking Wounded. The Walking Wounded kind of fell in my lap by accident because what happened was I was definitely learning a lot about Bayside. Around the time their drummer had just passed away, and I just started picking up CDs of theirs, and I was on LimeWire or FrostWire or whatever the fuck it was at the time, and I was downloading anything I could get that was Bayside. So at the time, it was like their acoustic CD had just come out and had come up prior, and I liked that CD a lot, and I love acoustic music too. I mean, I like heavy, I like a little bit of everything, and I mean, the only thing I'm truly not really like the biggest fan of, but I can tolerate, is country music, but it's just not for me. But back to the story. Bayside Walking Wounded definitely kind of fell in my lap. I remember downloading and realizing, like, oh, these are all from the album and all this stuff. And Duality caught my ear first, and then the title track for Walking Wounded was just such a great song. So I got pumped because I knew that I was going to get to see them over at the Middle East for the first time and hear these songs, and I was really, truly, truly enjoying it. And then by chance, it was one of my favorite. It was, like I said, one of my favorite shows, and one of my first shows I ever got to go to for the band Bayside, and in general, really, it was I got to see them at the Middle East. And on top of it, they played the 2007 Warped Tour that year. So it was like I got to enjoy my first favorite festival with one of my favorite bands, and I I also got to enjoy one of my first concerts with my favorite band. So it was just The Walking Wounded was definitely one of my most influential albums to date. So I definitely it just turned 10 years old, and it's such a classic. So I mean, if that's something that you're into, definitely pick up a copy, go on iTunes, and definitely check it out. But other than that, I mean, those are my top 10 from my high school years. I mean, if you ask me now, what am I listening to? Shit. I mean, I have a playlist on my iPod that I listen to regularly every day, and usually it's a big mix between Bayside. I mean, Lions is on there. Lost for Words is on there. I mean, you got a little bit of Vanna. You got the band This Wildlife. It's a little bit of everything, and a lot of cover tracks too, which I like. That's what I listen to now. So I've definitely come a long way from my high school years. I mean, it's not like I had anything super embarrassing on there. I mean, there was nothing that I'm ashamed of. I mean, there's a lot of older, if maybe in a future podcast, maybe I'll talk a little bit about some of my favorite songs. But for now, that is the show today, and I cannot wait to talk to you guys next week. All right. So thanks for listening to the Sideshow podcast. Definitely check us out on social media. My Instagram is Sideshow PC. I'm and actually the name altogether is going to be Sideshow PC. It's on Twitter, Instagram. You can look us up on Facebook, and definitely give us a like if you're listening to this on YouTube, and give me a subscribe or give me a comment. I don't care. It's all good. I mean, I definitely want you guys to check out more shows and future shows. So for now, thanks for listening, and have a great day.